The Triangle Waste Company occupied the top three floors of the Ash Building. On the eighth floor, 40 cutters, all men, worked at long wooden tables. Nearby, about 100 women did basting and other tasks. Paper patterns hung from lines of string over the tables. Although cutters wasted as little fabric as possible, there were always scraps, which they threw into bins under the tables. Every 2 months or so, a rag dealer took away about a ton of scraps, paying about 7 cents a pound. He then sold them back to cotton mills to remake into new cloth. The last pickup was in January. On March 25th, the cutters prepared for their next day's work. Since it was Saturday, everyone would leave early at 4:45 p.m. Workers from other firms had already left. Triangle employees had to stay longer to fill back orders. Carefully, cutters spread lawn, from the French word lingerie, on their tables 120 layers thick. Lawn was not just any cotton fabric. Sheer and lightweight, it was beautiful and comfortable, and burned as easily as gasoline. Each layer was separated from the others by a sheet of equally flammable tissue paper. After cutting, the various pieces would go by freight elevator to the ninth floor for sewing and finishing. There, 8 rows of sewing machine tables holding 288 machines in all occupied the entire width of the room. Only a narrow aisle separated one row from another. The tables were so close together that chairs touched back to back between the rows. From time to time, workers would take the finished shirtwaist to the 10th floor for inspection, packing, and shipping. This floor also held the showroom and owner's offices. By 4:40 p.m., the cutters had finished their work. With 5 minutes to go, they stood around talking until the quitting bell rang. Although it was against the rules, some lit cigarettes, hiding the smoke by blowing it up their jacket sleeves. On the floor above, workers had begun to walk toward the lockers to get their clothes and hats. They looked forward to Sunday and family visits, boyfriends, dances, and Nickelodeons. Although they had no inkling of what was about to happen, many only had minutes to live. We will never know for sure what started the Triangle Fire. Most likely, a cutter flicked a hot ash or tossed a live cigarette butt into a scrap bin. Whatever the cause, survivors said the first sign of trouble was smoke pouring from beneath a cutting table. Cutters flung buckets of water at the smoking pot, without effect. Flames shot up, igniting the line of hanging paper patterns. They began to fall on the layers of thin goods underneath them, recalled cutter Max Rothen. Every time another piece dropped, light scraps of burning fabric began to fly around the room. They came down on the other tables and they fell on the machines. Then the line broke and the whole string of burning patterns fell down. A foreman ran for the hose on the stairway wall. Nothing. No water came. The hose had not been connected to the standpipe. Seconds later, the fire leaped out of control. Yet help was already on the way. At exactly 4:45 p.m., someone pulled the 8th floor fire alarm. In less than 2 minutes, the horse-drawn vehicles of Engine Company 72 arrived from a firehouse 6 blocks away. The moment they arrived, the firefighters unloaded their equipment and prepared to swing into action. As they did, the area pumping station raised water pressure in the hydrants near the Ash Building. Other units soon arrived from across the Lower East Side with more equipment. Meanwhile, workers on the 8th floor rang furiously for the 2 passenger elevators. Safety experts have always advised against using elevators in a fire. Heat can easily damage their machinery, leaving trapped passengers dangling in space to burn or suffocate. Despite the danger, the operators made several trips, saving scores of workers before heat bent the elevator's tracks and put them out of action. Those who could not board elevators rushed the stairway door. They caused a pileup so that those in front could not open the door. Whenever someone tried to get it open, the crowd pinned her against it. All the girls were falling on me, and they squeezed me to the door, Ida Walensky recalled. 3 times I said to the girls, please, let me open the door, please. But they would not listen to me. Finally, cutter Lewis Brown barged through the door and forced the door open. Workers, shouting, crying, and gasping for air, slowly made their way downstairs. There were no lights in the stairway, so they had to grope their way in darkness. A girl fell, others fell on top of her. blocking the stairs until firefighters arrived moments later. Yet everyone who took the stairway from the 8th floor got out alive, exiting through the Washington Place doors. Those on the 9th floor were not so lucky. New Yorkers say that March comes in like a lion with cold wind and leaves like a lamb with April's warm showers. Now, as fire raged on the 8th floor, the elevator shafts became wind tunnels. Wind gusts made eerie sounds like the howling of great beasts in pain, while sucking flaming embers upward. On the 9th floor, embers landed on piles of unfinished shirtwaists and cans of oils used to make the sewing machines run smoothly. Instantly, the air itself seemed to catch on fire. Had there been fire drills, surely more would have survived. Unfortunately, confusion reigned. Workers had to make life and death decisions in split seconds amid fire, smoke, and panic. It was everyone for themselves. I was throwing them out of the way, Mary Buccelli said of women near her. No matter whether they were in front of me or coming from in back of me, I was pushing them down. I was only looking out for my own life. Mary joined others who ran to the Green Street stairway. They made it down to the street or up to the 10th floor and the roof before flames blocked this escape route. Others headed for the elevators and stairway on the Washington Place side of the building. Forcing open the doors to the elevator shaft, they looked down and saw an elevator starting what would be its last trip from the 8th floor. I reached out and grabbed the cables, wrapped my legs around them, and started to slide down, recalled Samuel Levine, a sewing machine operator. While on my way down, as slow as I could let myself drop, the bodies of 6 girls went falling past me. One of them struck me and I fell on top of the elevator. I fell on the body of a dead girl. Finally, I heard the firemen cutting their way into the elevator shaft, and they came in and let me out. Those who reached the 9th floor stairway door found it locked. This was not unusual, as employers often locked doors to discourage latecomers and keep out union organizers. "My God, I am lost," cried Margaret Schwartz as her hair caught fire. Nobody who went to that door survived, nor any who reached the windows. With a wave of fire rolling across the room, workers rushed to the windows only to meet more fire. Hot air expands. Unless it escapes, pressure will keep building, eventually blowing a hole even in a heavy iron container like a broiler. Heat and pressure blew out the 8th floor windows. Firefighters call the result lapping in, that is, sucking flames into open windows above. That is why you see black scorch marks on the wall above the window of a burnt-out room. With the fire advancing from behind and flames rising before them, people knew they were doomed. Whatever they did meant certain death. By remaining in the room, they chose death by fire or suffocation. Jumping 95 feet to the ground meant death on the sidewalk. We cannot know what passed through the minds of those who decided to jump. Yet their thinking in those last moments of life may have gone like this: if I jump, my family will have a body to identify and bury. But if I stay in this room, there will be nothing left. A girl clung to a window frame until flames from the 8th floor lapped in, burning her face and setting fire to her hair and clothing. She let go. Just then, Frances Perkins reached the scene from her friend's townhouse on the north side of Washington Square. "Here they come," onlookers shouted as Engine Company 72 reined in their horses. "Don't jump, stay there." Seconds later, Hook and Ladder Company 20 arrived. Firefighters charged into the building, stretching a hose up the stairways as they went. At the 6th floor landing, they connected it to the standpipe. Reaching the 8th floor, they crawled into the inferno on their bellies, under the rising smoke with their hose, yet nothing they did could save those at the windows. Photos of the portable towers show streams of water playing on the 3 top floors. A modern high-pressure pumper can send water as high as 1,000 feet. Plenty of water got through the windows, but not those with people standing in them. A burst of water under high pressure would have hurled them backwards into the flames. Hoping to catch jumpers before they hit the ground, firefighters held up life nets, a sturdy 10-foot square net made of rope. It was useless. A person falling from the 9th floor struck with a force equal to 11,000 pounds. Some jumpers bounced off the nets, dying when they hit the ground. Others tore the nets, crashing through to the pavement. The force was so great it took men off their feet, said Captain Howard Rutch of Engine Company 18. Trying to hold the nets, the men turned somersaults. The men's hands were bleeding, the nets were torn, and some caught fire from burning clothing. Officers, fearing their men would be struck by falling bodies, ordered the nets removed. The aerial ladders failed too, reaching only to the 6th floor. Desperate jumpers tried to grab a hold of a rung on the way down, missed, and landed on the sidewalk. People began to jump singly or in groups of 2 or 3, holding hands as they stepped out of windows. William G. Shepard, a reporter for United Press, watched the shower of bodies in horror. I saw every feature of the tragedy visible from outside the building. I learned a new sound, a more horrible sound than any description can picture. It was the sound of a speeding, living body on a stone sidewalk. Thud, dead. Thud, dead. Thud, dead. Thud, dead. 62, thud, dead. I call them that because the sound and the thought of death came to me each time, at the same instant. Down came the bodies in a shower, burning, smoking, flaming bodies with the disheveled hair trailing upward. On the sidewalk lay heaps of broken bodies. A policeman later went about with tags, which he fastened with wires to the wrists of the dead girls. The floods of water from the fireman's hose that ran to the gutter was actually stained red with blood. Onlookers saw many dreadful sights, none more so than the end of a love affair. A young man appeared at a window. Gently, he helped a young woman onto the windowsill, held her away from the building, and let go. He helped another young woman onto the windowsill. Those of us who were looking saw her put her arms around him and kiss him, Shepard wrote. Then he held her out into space and dropped her. But quick as a flash, he was on the windowsill himself. He was brave enough to help the girl he loved to a quicker death after she had given him a goodbye kiss. Meanwhile, others managed to reach the fire escape. It had not been designed for a quick exit. FDNY experts later declared that those on the 3 top floors of the Ash building could not have made it to the ground in under 3 hours. In reality, they only had 3 minutes. People crowded onto the fire escape. As they walked single file, flames lapped at them through broken windows. Worse, the human load became too heavy for the device to bear. Bolts that fastened it to the building became loose. It began to sway, and then it collapsed at the 8th floor, tumbling dozens into the courtyard. As the fire-crazed victims were thrown by the collapse of the fire escape, several struck the sharp-tipped palings, the New York Herald reported. The body of one woman was found with several iron spikes driven entirely through it. Others crashed through the skylight into the room below, where they died on the cement floor. The 10th floor was the best place to be. Those who worked there or reached it from the floor below survived by dashing up the stairs to the roof. When they arrived, they found the roof 15 feet lower than its Washington Place neighbors, a building shared by New York University and the American Book Company. Luckily, Professor Frank Summer was teaching his law class in a room that overlooked the Ash building. When Summer realized what was happening, he led his class to the roof of their building. They found 2 ladders left by painters during the week. Students lowered the ladders, climbed down, and helped survivors to safety. For some women, said Summer, it was necessary to beat out the flames that had caught their clothing, and many of them had blackened faces and singed hair and eyebrows. Yet only one person from the 10th floor died. Seeing flames licking up from the 9th floor, she panicked and jumped out a window. By 5:15 p.m., exactly 35 minutes after flames burst from beneath the cutting table, firefighters had brought the blaze under control. An hour later, Chief Croker made his inspection. He found that the Ash building had no damage to its structure. Its walls were in good shape. So were the floors. It had passed the test. It was fireproof. The woodwork, furniture, cotton goods, and people who worked in it were not. Of the 500 Triangle employees who reported for work that day, 146 died. Of these, 16 men were identified. The rest were women or body parts listed as unidentified. The Triangle Fires was New York's worst workplace disaster up to that time. Only the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center took more, about 2,500 lives. Chief Croker was no softy. He was used to the horrors that came with this job, but this was different. As he explored the top 3 floors of the Ash Building, he saw sights that utterly staggered him. The New York World reported, in the drifting smoke he had seen bodies burned to bare bones, skeletons bending over sewing machines. Those sights sent him down the street with quivering lips. Next morning, March 26th, Chief Croker returned for another look. The only creatures he found alive were some half-drowned mice. He picked one up, stroked it gently, and put it in his pocket. The chief would take it home, he said. It's alive. At least it's alive.